Welcome everybody to our training today. We're going to be doing an overview of the lead service line inventory, kind of a high level view of that. And then we're going to be talking about the new technical assistance program that we're starting up to help communities to complete their projects. So during the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And then at the end, if we haven't covered them by then, we will be happy to answer any questions that you have. So today we have on the line with us Cody Ferguson. Myself, I'm Susan Berud. I'm the Infrastructure Planning Coordinator with Commerce, Community Montana Division, and Tina, as well as Greg Montgomery from DEQ. And I'm gonna let each of them give a quick update on who they are and the role that they are gonna be playing in this program. Cody, do you wanna start?
Sure, thanks, Sue. Yeah, so I'm Cody Ferguson, the Community Planning Program Manager. I manage the Community Technical Assistance Program. Some of you are probably familiar with the CTAP program. Recently, with regard to water and wastewater infrastructure, we were really involved in providing technical assistance to communities to assist them in preparing applications for ARPA, the ARPA grant program. And we're still doing that as the ARPA program kind of moves into its next phase and a lot of those projects go into construction. But we've been working on creating a kind of a similar system to assist DEQ in informing communities about the funding available for the replacement of lead service lines, and then helping communities be prepared to apply for that funding. And I work closely with Sue and Tina, and I will be here, but I'm going to try to jump back into the back seat on this one.
But he'll be open for questions, right, Cody?
Sure.
All right, Tina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Tina Salazar. I'm with the Department of Commerce. I'm the Community Technical Assistance Specialist, and I'll be assisting with assigning the technical assistance that everyone will hopefully be applying for.
Great, thanks. And Greg?
Sure. Hi, my name's Greg Montgomery. I'm with DEQ in the Public Water Supply Bureau, and I work on, I guess, the lead programs for DEQ. So the lead in school program, as well as the lead and copper rule, kind of focus more on the lead and copper rule revisions, which include this inventory and kind of rolling out that program. And again, I work closely with Commerce on the program we'll be talking about today, as well as DNRC on the other funding part of this, which is the loan forgiveness. George Williams, who's not on the call today, but you can see his information on the screen. He's actually the lead and copper rule manager. He's based out of Missoula. So if you do have any questions related directly to the lead and copper rule or existing rule, you would go through George Williams. Anything related directly to like the inventory, you would call me.
Great, thanks. So we're going to be hearing a little more from Greg here very shortly. So just wanted to start off with talking a little bit about the lead health risks. I know a lot of people are familiar with the tragedy that happened in Flint, Michigan. That's what I get asked the most about, like, how do we compare to Flint, Michigan? We are not, in that situation, but it has raised a national conversation about lead health risks and what we can do to mitigate and potentially remove these and not have this ongoing generational issue. So lead is a toxic metal that's very harmful to humans, and it bioaccumulates, so it stays in the blood or in the body over time. So young children, infants and fetuses are most vulnerable to lead exposure because that's when the majority of brain development and cognitive development is occurring. Fetuses can be exposed through as the mothers during the gestation period, there is a release of calcium in there from their bones that can carry the lead with it, and it can cross the barrier into the fetus, can result in miscarriages, low birth weights, and a bunch of other health issues. So even at low levels of lead exposure, they've been linked to some very damaging biological effects, specifically on the central and the peripheral nervous system. And those are the things that are like going to cause learning disabilities and delays, impairs hearing. A lot of these youth that are exposed very young are shorter in stature. They never grow to their full height. And it also can impair the formation and the function of blood cells. So according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, primary exposure for lead in the United States and actually throughout the world is drinking water, and that flows through water pipes that may contain lead solder, are corrosive, and Greg is going to go through a host of that, how our drinking water actually gets the lead in it. And then homes that were built before 1978, when lead-based paint was banned, also are very high risk. Children who may chew on windowsills or cribs that were painted before there, or live in older buildings where the paint is flaking off and they may put that in their mouth. And that really causes a serious delay in those children, and can lower IQ, as well as really decrease their ability to pay attention in school, which leads to underperformance, not only through the school years, but actually studies have shown all the way into adulthood. Many of these youth that are exposed are sometimes in a lower socioeconomic status. They're living in older homes that haven't been updated, and it really does put that community at risk. A lot of people don't really realize that lead health risks also are significant for adults. So adults that are exposed to lead can suffer from cardiovascular effects, including their blood pressure and hypertension, a decrease in kidney function, reproductive problems in both men and women, and in rare cases, ingestion can even cause seizures, coma, and death. So this is a serious health concern by the World Health Organization, as well as our Centers for Disease Control, and the United States Environmental Protection Agency is very involved in this and provides the funding, I believe, for the technical assistance program that we're going to be using. So I'm going to turn this over to Greg Montgomery, and he's going to talk about where some of the sources of lead may be in your community, and also a little bit through the inventory, what some of those pipes might look like, and what is going to need to be required to be completed by October 16th of 2024.
Thanks, Sue. So yeah, sources of lead. So lead is kind of unique with the contaminants that we look at in public water supplies, in that it's generally not coming from your source. So it's not coming from the aquifer or the surface water body in general. It can, but we just haven't seen that a lot in Montana. One of the primary sources of lead that we see in the water is coming from premise plumbing, and specifically lead service lines, which is what most of today's discussion will be about. So again, that's the line that's going from the water main to the customer's building. There's other sources of lead as well within the home, and that could be copper pipe with lead solder, especially if those homes or buildings were built before 1986. there's tended to be a lot of lead in the solder. You can also see it in galvanized pipe. If that galvanized line is downstream of a lead line, galvanized has a tendency to absorb lead over time and then later release it. And you can also see it in old fixtures as well. Next slide. So the lead and copper rule was revised in December of 2021. And it's called lead and copper rule revision. And the big part and really the first step of that rule revision is putting together a inventory of all the service lines that a community has. And this applies to all community systems as well as all non-transient, non-community systems, which are like schools, business, office buildings, things like that are public water supplies. And this requirement, the inventory requirement, is due to be submitted by October 16th, 2024. So just over 18 months from now. So the inventory must include all service lines connected to the public water distribution system, and that's regardless of ownership. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But and then the really this inventory requirement is the first step of the kind of the most important first step of the new requirements that are in the lead and copper rule revision. So the inventory, again, is the first thing after, and then the new other requirements are based on that. So you can't do your new site sampling plans, replacement plans, compliance sampling until you have your inventory done. Everything's kind of built off of that. Next slide. So again, what is a service line? So the service line is simply the pipe connecting the water main to the interior plumbing of the building. It can be owned completely by the water system. It can be owned or it can be owned by the customer. In some cases, it's split between the customer and the water system. You can see on this picture, we kind of have it broken up into two parts. So you'll see there's a street side service line, and that goes from the water main to the curb stop. And then from the curb stop to the building would be the building side. And the reason why we break it up into two is a lot of times just because one side is copper, if you're doing inventory, doesn't mean the other side is copper. You can get differences. The service lines can be different materials, especially if maybe some water main work's been done in the past. Maybe the city already replaced up to the curb stop, so the line may be different. So to complete your inventory, you really have to know what both sides of that service line is. Next slide. So, how do you get started with your inventory? So DEQ's developed a lot of tools that you can use to help with your inventory. We have guidance documents just going over generally how you do an inventory. What things do you look for? What information can you get to find out what those materials are? We have guidance document on how to use our template. And we also put together inventory templates for community systems and one for NTNC systems. And those are basically Excel templates. You can get them off of our website. One of the caveats are it does have to be submitted to us in that Excel format. We have to then take that Excel, put into our database in order for us to upload to ultimately to EPA. So there's going to be more information coming out on our website as far as the guidance on funding, options, notification templates, communication information, links to Department of Commerce's website that Sue will talk about later. And there's the link to that, our website. Next slide. So our inventory guidance document is kind of broken up into kind of five main sections. So the material classification. So ultimately, what is your service line? Is it lead? Is it galvanized recurring replacement? Is it non-lead? Is it status unknown? Those 4 categories are, at the end of the day, what you need to know and what we have to, what EPA needs to be submitted to them. In order to determine what those materials are, there's historical records review, which are, again, looking at your previous, if you've done any evaluations, building codes, records, inspections, anything like that, where you can tell maybe they documented what that service line connection was. You can also do more investigation methods, which might include visual inspections, like having the homeowner or you going into the, where the line enters the basement, maybe connecting to the water meter. You can determine what at least that side of the water main is, or the service line is. There's also things like additional sequential sampling techniques you can use, excavating potholing, as well as predictive modeling, which is like a statistical analysis. And then the other section we have is just going over the template and the submittal process on how that's submitted to DEQ. And then public accessibility. So inventories have to be accessible to the general public. And depending on the size of your system, there's different requirements. So systems less than 50,000 customers just have to make it publicly available. So that could be on a website, that could be available upon request at your office, posted somewhere, things like that. If your system is over 50,000 customers, it is required to be, the inventory has to be available online. Next slide. So, like I mentioned already, the material classification, EPA is looking ultimately for 4 different classifications. Is it lead? So meaning is either part of that service line, the street side or the building side, is that lead? It would be a lead line. Galvanized recurring replacement can be confusing. Essentially what that means is if you have a galvanized pipe, if half your service line is galvanized and the part right in front of it, so the street side is lead or was lead at one time, that line becomes galvanized recurring replacement. So in a way, it's treated as lead. If the whole entire service line is galvanized, it's always been galvanized, it would then essentially be considered non-lead. So again, the third category is non-lead. So that's, again, copper, plastic, PVC. If it's a straight galvanized line that was never in contact with lead, those are all considered under that non-lead category. And then last one is unknown. So they call it lead status unknown. Simply, if you just don't know what that material is, you can mark it as unknown. One thing I'd say about the unknown part is EPA will treat unknown lines as lead until proven otherwise. So when you go and do your replacement plans, you'll have to treat that as a lead line and have plans either to confirm what that material is or ultimately replace. And then EPA also recommends, and then we also recommend it as well, it's in our template, that while you're going through this process, also document what your connectors are. So it's typically a 2-foot piece of pipe that's connecting your water main to that service line. A lot of times you'll see, they're called goosenecks or pigtails. Those can be lead. I've seen some communities already that, they don't have any lead lines, but they do have lead goosenecks and pigtails. But EPA and DQ at this time just highly recommend that you at least inventory those as part of this process. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this goes over how you come up with that classification. So the lead, non-lead, galvanized recurring replacement, to come up with that classification for the entire line, you have to look at both sides. So what's the street side? What's the building side? And this is all on our template on how it's broken up. But these are essentially the sections that you would fill out. So you'd be filling out what the street side material is and what the building side material is. And then our template will automatically generate what the overall classification is. The next slide. So this is just simply a table showing that. So, if your street side portion is lead and your building side portion is lead, your overall classification would be a lead line. If your, for instance, your street side is non-lead, but was previous lead at one time, or maybe you couldn't tell what it was previously, the on the street side, and your building side was galvanized, that line would be considered galvanized requiring replacement. Next slide. So this is just a table or picture kind of showing you generally what you can look at for, how do you classify what these materials are? What information can you look at? And kind of goes step by step. So the first one is just the preliminary records review. So looking at maybe your local plumbing code. Was lead ever used in the past? Was it ever documented anywhere? Did your town ban the use of lead after a certain year? You can look at community records. So installation and maintenance records for service lines, plumbing permits, tax records, meter install records, anything like that where you would have, that's kind of the first step, is seeing what you have before you kind of go to these other three steps. Another step you might do is on-site or a basic visual inspection. So you can do a resident survey. You can ask homeowners, either ask them permission to enter the home to see what's coming into the basement for their water meter. You can have them do it themselves, take photos. You can interview with, utility staff when they do meter inspections. Have they seen, do they know what kind of plumbing is there? You can also reach out to local plumbers in the area or other water utilities, like or historical people have worked there in the past. What have they seen when they're doing work, if they've come across any lead? And then some of the other things you can do is a water analysis. So you can take basically, it's called sequential sampling to determine if there's lead lines. We do allow this method, although it would require plan in place. So you let us know how you would determine this. And then there's ultimately excavation. So you can pothole with like a vacuum truck or a backhoe and kind of daylight those lines to see what those are. And then the last method that's not on here would be like a statistical analysis, which again would require a plan. So if you do go that route, please let us know, give us a call, we can help you through that. And this just goes into a little bit more detail on historical records, what you can do. When the lead and copper rule first came out in 91, there was a requirement that a material evaluation be done. If you happen to still have that or have record of it, you can always use that. There might be some information in there on service line materials, construction, building code, local ordinances, permits, all that kind of stuff you can look at. Distribution maps, any kind of records, meter install records or anything like that where you can determine what that material was. And then also state requirements, so engineering reports, designs and specs, approvals. We're working on ways that you can more easily access our engineering documents, so you can hopefully determine material type. Next slide. So one thing is with the plumbing code, Montana adopted the federal lead ban in December of 1987. So that being said, anything built after 1988 or 1988 and after should not have lead, and you can consider that as non-lead in the inventory. So even if you don't have any other records indicating that, if you know that home or that building was built from 88 or after, you can use that as, your line of evidence indicating that it's not lead. And then you can also use the Montana cadastral system, which you can look up for homes and see when homes were built. And we're also working on other ways that we can make that more easily available to everybody. Next slide. So again, this is just the slide showing some of the service line investigation methods or more visual inspections. So you can look at, again, what the material is coming into the home, Sometimes you can open up where the curb stop is, and I've seen other states they've tried drop cameras that go down the hole, and they can visually see what the material is on either side of the curb stop. There's sampling, excavating or potholing, and predictive modeling. Merging methods, EPA's continuing to do a lot of research on other methods to determine what those lines may be. And then so if they do come across a technique that may be beneficial, they'll roll that out, let everybody know what that is. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of options at this point other than visually looking at it or having records indicating what that material was. Next slide. So there's, again, how to submit your inventory. So right now, we do have we ask that the inventory be submitted to our email address, which is landingcopper@mt.gov. Probably within the next month or so, we're also going to be having an online portal. So you'll be able to go onto DEQ's website and submit it electronically through the portal, and then you'll get an email confirmation back that we've received it. We do need that in the template in Excel format. So it's an Excel on our website. We do ask that it be submitted back to us in Excel. If it comes back as a PDF, we can't upload it into our system. And then our template also is locked. So we tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. I do understand it may not be, some people may want a couple extra rows to add more information. But we have to make sure that the template matches what's going into our database or it won't upload correctly. So that's why that format is locked. And then if any of the community decides to go through some of the other, I guess, vendors out there, like 120 Water or Blue Conduit or using GIS, they can certainly do so to store their inventories and manage that. But at the end of the day, that data still has to be exported into our DEQ format. And both 120 and Blue Conduit have our template and our format, so they understand it has to be in that format before it's sent to us. And then again, inventory has to be submitted by October 16th, 2024. Okay, next slide. So obviously all this kind of rolled out in 2021. At the same time, in the bipartisan infrastructure law that came out around the same time, Congress set aside about $15 billion just to address lead service lines. Montana has been allocated up to about $28 million per year over 5 years. And this money can be used for addressing lead service lines. So that includes everything from doing your inventory up to replacement to restoration of that property. This funding will be dispersed through, basically have the same process through the state revolving fund. You do have to complete the project priority survey form to be eligible, at least for the loan forgiveness part of that. And that was sent out last October for systems to apply for. I think we got about 56 systems overall applied for the funding. And we had a deadline of that of November of last year in order for us to, every year we have to submit an intended use plan to EPA and how we're going to spend the money. So if communities out there that didn't get on that list, you can still submit this form at any time. It's available on our website, and you just get added to the next year's intended use plan for funding. But in order to get any kind of loan forgiveness, you do have to be on that priority list. So again, it's a loan forgiveness program with the majority of the funds there's no match required, and it's currently a 1.5% interest rate. So again, it's run very similar to traditional SRF, but I think the rates are better, and I think the loan forgiveness parts are better. So there's better, I guess, parts to it. So if his system qualifies for forgiveness, they would be eligible up to 60% forgiveness to a maximum of $2 million. And then one of the other things out of this funding, we are taking a few set-asides, one being the technical assistance set-aside. That's what Sue will be talking to in a moment. And we're also working on a smaller kind of reimbursement program for the systems that may not need the TA support from Commerce, but want to do the inventory on their own. We'll have a reimbursement program for that as well. Next slide. So these are some of the, for the loan forgiveness part, this would be the eligible projects, the things that could be covered. So it involves complete removal of lead service lines. The funding cannot be used for partial replacements. And we also highly recommend not doing partial replacements. Research shows it's actually health-wise worse to do a partial than just leave the service line in place. So partial being if you're doing water main work and you only replace the lead line from the water main to the curb stop and you leave the other half in, it tends to mobilize a lot of lead into the water, and that tends to build up in their people's homes, especially if they're not flushing and clearing out the aerators in their home. So again, we recommend not doing partials, and this funding can only be used for full replacements. It can also be used for anything involved in that replacement project. So removal of the pigtails if lead or galvanized, replacement of the curb stops, curb boxes, anything involved in the replacement part itself can be covered, including restoration of the property. So removal of landscaping and restoring that, sidewalks, driveways, anything that would be necessary to replace that lead service line can be is eligible for reimbursement. Cover permit fees. It can cover temporary pitcher filters or point of use filters that are, as long as they're certified to remove lead. Again, it can be used for development or updating of lead service line inventories, planning, design, as well as non-routine lead sampling. So again, you could use this to do your sampling as part of your inventory. This funding can't be used for your compliance samples as part of the lead and copper rule. Okay, next slide. I think that's all I had. Yep.
So I see we have a couple of questions in the chat. Sure. Tina, do you want to read those off? They're probably for Greg, and then we'll go into technical assistance.
I don't have access, unfortunately.
Oh, okay, hang on. So I have one that says, why is DEQ's inventory spreadsheet template different from the one suggested for use by EPA? Is Montana requiring additional data elements beyond the basic inventory data elements in the federal rule?
So our template is slightly different than EPA's. Generally, it is asking for the same information. And the reason why we didn't go with theirs is mainly because of our database. The format DEPA has cannot be dumped into our GIS database. So the template we're using was specifically designed so once it's submitted to us, it can be uploaded directly into the database smoothly. And we also try to simplify the EPA one a little bit. As far as required information, again, the information on there is what was on the EPA one. There's information on our template that's not required. I mean, one thing is, some of the questions we asked are, what's the size of your service line? And general questions like that. And we figured we want this also to be a tool for water systems. So if you can have an inventory of your service line, the more information you can put on there, maybe the more that'll help you down the road for planning purposes. And there's also some information on there. The last half of the template asks about what type of building is the service line hooked to? What type of premise plumbing does that building have? And while that's not specifically required for the inventory, you will still need that information for the next step, which is for the site sampling plan. So the sampling plan, the compliance sampling criteria is changing. So currently it's going from 3 tiers to 5 tiers. So you have to be able to determine what tier location that is. And in order to do that, you do need that information like what type of home, what type of building it is. Is it residential? Is it a school, etc.? You know, what kind of premise plumbing it is. When was it built? To the best you can. I understand some of that information is not hard to get, but it's not easy to get. But it's going to make it a lot easier developing your site sample plan with that information.
Great. And then there's one more question, Greg. They want to know, and we've heard this from several different areas, when will we find out if the work proposed in our November 2022 funding survey will be funded?
Sure. So that project priority list, really that just gets you on the list. That went to EPA last week. The overall list and the intended use plan, they had a few comments. We're fixing that. That'll probably go final next week to them. So, you know, we'll probably have funding probably by June of this year. Depends when EPA approves it. But at that point, if you requested funding and you think you have projects, the next step is filling out the application process for the SRF funding, and going through that process. So really the intended use, the priority survey that was sent out last year is just to get you on the list. It's kind of the first step, especially if you have projects that you will go immediately, you know, please give us a call and we can start the application process.
Great. Thanks, Greg. So we're going to talk a little bit about that help is available. So we have lots of different communities that have started and are partially done, some that are mostly done, some that haven't even started. So we want to let you know about the technical assistance program that's going to be available for the lead service lines. And as was indicated earlier, this is going to be a little bit similar to what we did with the ARPA MAG technical assistance. So qualifying programs are non-transient water systems and districts serving less than 10,000 people, and they are eligible for technical assistance. And we are right now in the process of receiving applications for interested experts, which includes engineers, CRDCs, EDOs, other community partners that will be assigned to communities to help them complete their lead service line inventory. And then if there's enough funding, they may also request assistance with creating their plan. After that, there will be additional funding. Some, you know, we'll continue to do webinars, and et cetera, for applying for the additional funding for qualified activities. And as Greg mentioned, that's going to be through the SRF program, a separate SRF fund, but it will be run the same way. So if you go on and fill out the survey now, that puts you on the list, on the priority list, but you also can work on filling out your actual application if you think that you're, you know, going to qualify and need that right away. And so we'll probably have some trainings on that as well. So the new Community Technical Assistance Program, CTAP program for lead service lines, application and program info is now live as of yesterday afternoon. So you can either take down this website or you can snap the QR code, which should take you there as well. And we're going to go there and kind of walk you through a little bit of the information that's on there and how you can apply for the technical assistance program. But some of the things that we would like to provide for the communities and really would like your feedback on what might be useful for you. We want to include some educational materials to help you have this conversation with your communities about the importance of lead service line removal and actually lead throughout the community. So lead in schools is focused a lot on fixtures. There's still older homes that may have fixtures, that type of thing. How we can kind of educate the community and build a collaborative partnership. We're working on a community planning toolkit that will be available for communities, and you can indicate that when you apply for technical assistance on our website that you would be interested in one of those. And it will have some information kits about how to test to see if you have lead, copper, or galvanized, how to get your communities involved, and also potentially some templates for letters or door hangers, other things that will be available for you to use for education information within your communities. And we also want to be available to help you with organizing some of your community meetings. So as much as possible, you know, obviously we can't get around to every meeting, but some of the meetings that we do go to, we may make available over Zoom so that you can see what's working in other communities. We do have some really good success stories of some different communities. We'll be sharing some of those at Rural Water next week, and then they'll also be going probably on the website at some point. And then general ongoing trainings and support. So like I said, reach out to us, let us know what you need for your community, and we'll do everything that we can to help you with that. This is a list of acronyms. I'm going to put this on our site as well, just because there is a lot of them that is used, and it's a little bit easier to have a conversation with your community when you can provide them maybe with some acronym lists, also for your own use. There's a lot of new ones if you haven't dealt with water before, like, you know, blood service line, LSL, you'll hear that a lot, and the GIS, the Geographic Information System, and the lead and copper rule, and then the lead and copper rule improvements, and the lead and copper rule revisions. So they all have different acronyms. So I am going to go off of here for a second. And I'm going to take you to our new site. So I'm going to go back one, sorry. So this is the new platform that we have for lead service lines. You can get here if you go onto the Community Technical Assistance program. There's a link from there as well as at the top of the carousel. So this talks about the lead service line inventory technical assistance program. Right here, information on why it needs to happen and when it's going to be done. When you click on here, this is where you'll go to apply for technical assistance. So you'll just fill out this pretty short little form that will tell us a little bit about your community. And then we will start putting together that list for technical assistance assignments. Probably those will start happening in about July after our procurement is completed for the process that we're now in for hiring some experts to assist with your community lead service lines. Also on this page, there's a lot of other really good information. Some of it links back to DEQ. DEQ has a wonderful website with all of the information that you could ever possibly need on completing your projects. We've simplified these down into some accordions here. This talks about the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act and what that is going to fund here in Montana. Here's some information on the lead service line inventory, like Greg was talking about today. There's a lot of that. There's your determination guidance. There's a template for instructions of how to fill out your lead service line inventory. So this goes through each of the columns and exactly what needs to be put into there. And as Greg said, this needs to be submitted to DEQ in this format in Excel in order to be accepted. And then there's how to navigate, and we're going to be adding a couple more on here as well. Here's where we're going to put some of your educational tools. for example, this is a homeowner handout that you could use to give your communities to let them know the effects of lead. And you can personalize this with your own name and water district and start having that conversation with your communities. Also in here is a test kit pocket card. If you are at Rural Water next week and you're in Greg's conversation, he has some really neat little kind of kits that have a magnet. Has this card. It's got flashlight and all of the information that you would need if you were at a home and or outside looking at pipes to determine what those maybe consisted of. If they're lead, galvanized iron, copper, or brass. So that's going to be really handy. And then here we have our upcoming trainings and recordings. And you can go to these. We're going to record them as well. And so we'll list the recorded ones. This is the training that we're doing today. We will be doing a training at WASAC on Wednesday morning of next week. And you can get on to the Rural Water Conference information here and sign up either to be a part of that funding workshop with WASAC, or also if you would like to be a part of some of the other workshops. We'll be doing one with Greg and I and George that will talk about this and technical assistance, as well as there are 2 others that are going to be offered by other community partners. And then here is some other upcoming trainings and guidance from EPA and some other entities. So under there, we have a little more information about the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So you're going to hear this referred to as IDJA. And this is what was the bipartisan infrastructure law before it was signed into law. It was just referred to as the bill. So this is the same funding source, if you heard us speak about that earlier. And so this also talks about community technical assistance is creating a pool of technical service providers that will help you with working through your lead service line, working with your local governments, helping to inventory your water systems and determine where lead is and in preparation for a replacement or mitigation plan. And then under here is a nice box. This comes down and just talks about what Greg went through, some different things that are eligible projects that the funding could be used for that he was talking about with it's 60% forgiveness, 40% loan, and about a 1.5% interest rate, I think is currently what that's looking like. So a really great opportunity. That funding is not going to be available forever. So we really suggest getting your inventory started with as soon as possible and getting on this priority list. So this is what Greg referred to as the priority list. This asks just about your system, who you serve, some other questions that you need to fill out. And then that will kind of put you on the priority list. That isn't necessarily in order of application. That's going to be in order of greatest need. But the only way to get on it is to fill that out. So I encourage you to do that right away. And then underneath there is also Greg's information. So I guess the main takeaway from this would be to go through and look and see what you think you're going to need help with, or maybe what you have a community has already accomplished. And then please fill this out. If you are going to want some technical assistance, we're putting that together now, putting that list together. So we really appreciate you filling that out so we can kind of start having an idea of how many systems that we're going to need to be including in that program. So that's kind of all I have on the technical assistance program from Commerce, Community Montana Division. Do we have any questions? Let's see if anyone has their hand raised. If you put in the chat, if you'd like to speak, then I can open that up too. Julie, how do technical experts get selected? So that's part of a procurement process that we're going through right now. That's a great question. I'm going to show you. If you are a community partner that would be interested in applying to help communities do lead service line inventories, right here in this little spot right here, it says visit EMAX. Technical assistance will help water systems with their inventories. If you're interested in applying, you'll visit this site, and that you'll need to be a vendor. So if you're not already, go in and sign up to be a vendor in EMAX, but it will open up here, and then you'll want to look for, it's under CTAP. Let's see, it's gonna be a lead service line. I think it's actually on page 2. So I'm gonna take you there just so you can find it. I swear it's on here because I just looked at it this morning. Ah, there we go. So it's on page 3 and it is open. It shows right here, CTAP lead service line, Community Technical Assistance Program. So you'll want to go in there and apply for that. Those applications close the end of May. And then we'll probably be having that list available about the beginning of July. Cody, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I don't think so. If you have any questions, there should be a, on the RFP, if you go through EMAX, there should be a place where you could submit those questions, and they have to go, and we can kind of answer general ones, but really questions should go through the State Procurement Bureau, who is hosting the procurement process. So the direction should be right there with the RFP.
Yeah, so if you go to the RFP, it's going to direct you to your EMAX. So you'll need to log in here, and here's how you go to register for all that. And then you're a vendor, and it'll populate all of the information for you. I think we answered that one. Are there any other questions or thoughts? Would love to know your thoughts about what could be useful within your own communities as you complete this project. All right, I don't see any. Hopefully, if you have any questions, that you'll feel free to give us a call. We will be at the booth at Rural Water. We'll have several presentations. So please feel free to reach out to us, contact us. We'd love to hear from you and provide the best program possible to help you with your lead service lines. So Greg, did you have anything you wanted to share, or Tina, before we wrap up?
No, I'm good.
I'm good too.
All right. Well, thank you. Hopefully we'll see you all next week or hear from you soon. Have a great day.